Good evening, Michael. Yes, thank you, and welcome to the studio this evening. We have a very special guest with us in the studio today. This is Laura Lavoie, a children's book author based out of St. Lawrence County. I'm super excited to have you in the studio. Welcome to the studio today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I want to get right into talking about Monster Baker, but before I get ahead of myself, I want to get to know a little bit about you. Could you tell me and the viewers, who is Laura Lavoie for those who don't know?
Yeah, so I'm a children's book author. I also work in the wellness office at St. Lawrence University. I'm a mom. I've got 2 young kids who are in elementary school. And I think one of the biggest things is I love books. I've been into reading since I was a really young age, and I'm really excited that now I get to create books for people to enjoy too.
What's something you like most about books, and what inspired you to become a writer? Was it based off the books that made you want to, your love for books that made you want to get into writing?
Yeah, so I really developed a love for books from a young age. I was an only child until I was 12, and I lived in a pretty rural area, didn't have a lot of neighbors close by, and so I just got really into reading. That was kind of my way of traveling, of meeting characters, and I really love in children's book, there's this kind of magic that's there, and that's what really sparked my love of reading. And so as I got older, I started trying to kind of keep up with writing with the age that I was. So when I was in my 20s, I was trying to write for adults, and then when I was going to become a mom in 2015, I started reading kids' books again as I was trying to build a library for my daughter, and just kind of fell in love with that magic that's in kids' books all over again, and thought, I really want to try my hand at writing for kids, because it's so fun. You can do just so many things that you can't really do in adult books outside of fantasy, and that's what's gotten me into it, is just the creative possibilities that you can do for kids.
And you started writing your books and started making your books during the pandemic, is that correct?
So I started writing a little bit earlier than that, but I sold my first book in 2019, but then it didn't come out until 2022. During the pandemic, a lot of people's books got delayed, and that was kind of a slow time where things were taking a little bit longer. But I wrote a lot during the pandemic because I was home a lot more, and so actually one of my upcoming books I wrote during the summer of 2020.
And I want to get talking about your upcoming book, but I want to talk about your past 3 releases, starting with, there were 2 that have come out in the past, Vampire Vacation and the one we have here today, Monster Baker. Can you tell me a little bit about your books?
Yeah, so Vampire Vacation is the story of this little vampire who isn't into typical vampire kinds of things. And he really, really wants to go to the beach so badly, just wants to surf, build sandcastles, and do things like that. And so his family takes a trip to Transylvania every year, and he decides that he needs to convince them that they have to go to the beach. This is his dream. And so kind of comes up with all these elaborate schemes for how to convince his parents that this is a good idea, despite the fact that they are vampires.
Who doesn't want to go to the beach right now, am I right? and talk to me a little bit about Monster Baker here. This is what originally sparked my interest and what made me want to get you in the studio. Tell me a little bit about Monster Baker.
Yeah, so this book was really inspired by watching cooking shows with my great-grandmother when I was growing up. Sometimes I would go and stay with her during the day, and we would watch kind of those old cooking and baking shows together. And I think that's an experience a lot of people kind of my age and older have had. And when you're writing a picture book, I always like to put something in there too for the adult who's reading it. So Monster Baker is about a little monster who watches cooking shows with her grand monster, and her grand monster teaches her how to bake, and she develops this love of baking through that relationship. So when Grand Monster's 247th birthday is coming up, Tilly the little monster decides that she wants to bake her a birthday cake. But of course, as anyone baking for the first time or maybe even the 100th time can experience, stuff can go wrong. And so that's what happens, and she kind of has to come up with some creative solutions for how to pull off this cake in time.
Is there going to be a recipe book coming out for Monster Book in the near future?
Oh gosh, I would love that. There is a recipe in the back of the book for a cookie called Chocolate Cherry Scaries that is my kids' favorite cookie that I make. And I've heard from lots of people that have baked it that they've come out pretty good, so it seems like people are enjoying it.
I need to look into this recipe because now I want to make that. But before I start thinking about that, I want to ask you about your new book. You just recently released a book called Duck Duck Taco Truck. Talk to me a little bit about what this book is going to be about.
Yeah, so this book is my first rhyming picture book, which I think makes it extra special. I had never really thought that I would write a book in rhyme because there's just a lot of extra things to think about, and it kind of gets complicated. You're a little bit more limited in terms of how you can tell the story, but I actually found that challenge really fun. So it's a story of these two ducks who have a taco truck on the beach, and then this goose comes in with this competing food truck that steals all of their business. And so it's kind of them working through that. And trying to figure out if there can be some teamwork there to work together. But as a part of that, there's a lot of fun mashups between kid favorite foods as these birds try to figure out how to do this food truck thing together. And so it's a lot of fun. And I hope that the rhyme and the mention of all the different really fun food kind of helps it to feel extra special.
And I remember reading on your website that you really love punny related things. Will we see a lot of puns in this book?
This one, there's some. Like, there's kind of some funny references to, like, instead of needing an extra hand, needing an extra wing. There's jokes about ruffled feathers and things like that, like when the ducks get upset. It's not quite as pun heavy as I would say Monster Baker and Vampire Vacation have been, but there's still some in there.
What inspires you when you write your stories the most?
Well, so I loved reading so much as a kid, and I really like the idea of creating lifelong readers, which is something that really only children's authors can do, which is neat, to be able to inspire a love of reading in a kid and then have them read all the way up through. So that's definitely something that I'm thinking about. But I also just love making people laugh, and when I read my books to kids and I can kind of hear those giggles at the parts that are supposed to be funny, that's always a good feeling. And I think sometimes, things can feel really serious, and anytime that you can be a little bit goofy and have a little bit of fun, that's always a good thing. So that's always something that I'm trying to do when I'm writing a story too.
And now I know for aspiring authors and aspiring writers out there, they're always looking for that edge, and there's always that feeling of writer's block. I know I get it when I'm writing stories. What's something you could say to aspiring artists who want to get started in becoming an author, becoming a published artist like yourself?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that inspiration can come from all sorts of different places. And so I keep a notebook of ideas, and anything, even if it's just a little spark of something funny that one of my kids said, or something I notice if I'm kind of down on the floor seeing things from their eye level, I write that down. And you never know what random thing you heard or experienced or just something that pops into your head is going to spark an idea. And sometimes I try to do creative exercises around that too. Like Monster Baker, I was making lists of things that were a little bit scary and things that were a little bit sweet and trying to pair them together, and I had monster and cupcake written down, and that sparked this idea of how funny would that be to have this monster baking these kind of semi-gross but sweet creations, and that could be a really fun thing that kids might find funny and interesting.
And they even look a little bit like a cupcake if you look closely. You've got the frosting on top here. You've got the the whole thing there.
Yeah, interesting you should mention that. The illustrator Vanessa, when she created the character of Tilly, that's one of the things that she said was that she wanted her to have this kind of meringue style hair that moved with her emotions. So you can see in the book when Tilly's sad, her hair droops down. When she's happy, it perks back up. So that's a really fun element that the illustrator added in.
I love that. That's super creative. And you've worked with other illustrators too, is that correct?
Yeah, so the illustrator for Monster Baker is Vanessa Morales. It's Micah Player for Vampire Vacation, and then Duck Duck Taco Truck is Teresa Martinez. So typically the larger publishing houses will pick an illustrator for the book based on their team's vision of what it's going to look like. And it's actually really exciting because it's so fun to write a story and then see how the illustrators envision your characters and what they come up with for what they're going to look like. So it's kind of like a fun surprise to see first sketches and see what they're going to look like.
Well, folks, keep your eyes peeled because Duck Duck Taco Truck just came out today, as a matter of fact, June 11th. And where can people go to purchase this book or learn more about you?
Yeah, so as far as purchasing the book, people can typically get it from just about anywhere. Any independent bookstore, Barnes & Noble, anything like that. If they don't have it in stock, they'd be able to order it. Or, it could be ordered online. IndieBound's a great place to go to order from local independent bookstores, or it's available on Amazon or any place like that where you would buy books. And as far as learning more about me, I have a website. It's just my name, lauralavoyauthor.com. or I'm also on a lot of social media platforms as Elle Lavoie author. So that's a good place to connect, to see what books I have, coming out soon as more books get announced, and just kind of keep an eye on my work.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for coming to the studio today. It was a pleasure having you and a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great, and I really appreciate it.